Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Inroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois, and we have got a great show for you today. It is our Halloween Spooktacular, where we are going to be talking about creepy crawlies. We'll look back at the history of some kind of nasty insects, I suppose, that maybe have had an impact on humans in the past and maybe even still today. Either are still having an impact or have quite a bit of lore behind them, and if that lore is true or not. And you know, I'm not doing this by myself. I'm joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. We got some spiders too, so we're gonna hit all the creepy crawlies today.
Yes. I sorry, Ken. I forgot to say, yes, we're insects and arachnids.
Insects and friends.
Yes, insects and friends. And being our Halloween spooktacular, of course we're dressed up. So I suppose listeners, if you want to see what we're wearing, or who we're wearing today, we'll leave a link below to the YouTube video. You could check that out. But I guess, Ken, you look like you've just popped right out of the garden, with your bright red pointy garden gnome cap. Yes, like you just kind of emerged out of the ground like that. You have your nice kind of a collared shirt, which looks like you're working hard in the garden, which a blue collared shirt. Oh yeah, you look very, very gnomish. So I like it.
Thank you for the idea.
Yes, well, and the red beard complements it too. So
yes. Otherwise, it's just going to be Yukon Cornelius again.
Well, it's Yukon, but with a pointy hat this time.
Yes. So then I guess we should describe your outfit. It's rather colorful.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Some nice rainbow hair, a stethoscope, lab coat.
But I'm a doctor today, as a doctor clown to you, sir. So yes, I have a clown wig on, and I've borrowed my wife's stethoscope and her lab coat from her work, and so yeah, I'm a doctor, and prescription today is fun. So can't take myself seriously, even one bit. So yeah, it's probably as close as I'll ever get to with a PhD doctor-esque type atmosphere. So I'm ready to diagnose some spooky insects today.
Let's do it.
All right.
Our first ones we got are spiders, everybody's favorite.
That's right. The one that has all the story and the lore behind it. You know, all of the Halloween decorations have this particular one.
Yeah. So the first one are black widow spiders. So these are venomous. So these are of human health concern at times, although typically not usually much of a problem. So I think one, I guess, misnomer with these is the widows. So they're, it's believed that females kill and consume their mates after they mate. So females will eat the males after they mate, kind of like with praying mantids. At least that's the last tale. But like praying mantids, this typically really only happens in laboratory settings. Out in the wild, it's not nearly as often as people believe. And I think that the prevailing thought is that they get consumed. It's more because they can't escape quick enough than the females actually actively hunting them and trying to eat them. It's more of a you're too slow, so you're going to get eaten.
I was going to eat you anyway, but I suppose we'll mate first, and then if you can get away fast enough, I'll eat you then. So when it comes to our black widow, it looks like we have a lot of self-reported black widow bites. In 2010, there was over 2,000 self-reported black widow bites in the U.S. It sounds like when someone says self-reported, we don't have a confirmation. We don't have a black widow in our hand or in a jar, hopefully, to actually say like, this is what created this thing on me. So whether it's a wound or a rash or a necrotic spot in your flesh, so I suppose, and we might get more into this on our next spider, but I wonder if there's a lot of misdiagnosis even with black widow.
I would think probably, I mean, a lot of these are self reported. Yeah, unless you have the spider in this case, or you actually see it. I think a lot of times spiders get blamed
Hmm.
um, for any kind of, I guess, necrotic or
Hmm.
pick your symptom there. That may have a couple holes. I think spiders get a lot of the blame, and I think even in the literature, that's not necessarily the case for a lot of stuff. I don't know about maybe not as much with black widows, but our next spider in particular. Um,
Yeah. I think, and that's the issue. Like people, I know people say, well, if you get bit by a snake in the wild and you don't know what it is, just grab it and bring it into the ER when you come in. It's like, well, I don't know if I'm gonna grip. I don't know if I'm gonna grab the snake. I
for
think,
how excited they'll
think,
be.
yeah. So if it's already biting me, it's probably gonna be really hard to get that snake. So anyway, yes, confirmation of what we're talking about. Yeah, that's a big thing. So all right, Ken, I guess continue about the tale of the Black Widow.
Yeah, so these are again they are venomous. They are of human concern, but I think death is exceedingly rare. It does happen, but it's the exception, not the rule for that. Um, from what I've read, typically people recover within 24 hours, or if they receive treatment, 3 to 5 days. If they don't, they just tough it out, so to speak,
Hmm.
at home. And that can be, when you go in at getting, pain relief, cleaning it out, things like that. People that are sensitive, um, there's an anti-venom that is produced with antibodies in the serum from horses. So horses are exposed to low levels of the black widow venom, and then they get that anti-venom from that. This is from an article from University of Florida because they have lots of widows down there. When administered properly by a licensed medical practitioner, it has been shown to be highly effective, especially if patients receive or are treated within the first 3 hours after a bite. So if that's a concern. Again, 2010, you had 2,200 self-reported bites in the entire United States. So again, it's not particularly common. I'd say they're kind of, I think they're usually described as reluctant biters. They're living out, in brush piles, out in kind of hidden areas. I think the first, usually typically, they try to run before they bite. It's like a lot of things. Once they get trapped, is when they'll resort to biting.
So you mentioned Florida and Illinois, would we encounter maybe a northern species of this spider outside, or um, perhaps spared from being encountering the dreaded Black Widow here?
So we do have black widows. And we have northern black widow. So southern black widow is one we typically think of. It's got that red hourglass on the other side of the abdomen for the females. And I do believe they go up into Illinois for southern black widows. So they also have northern black widow. Um, they kind of have the hourglass shape, but it's broken in the middle. So it's more they have two red dots. We can throw up pictures of those right now, so you can see those if you're not. And they're black, so like the name, they're kind of a shiny black spider.
Mhm.
But yeah, the areas, if they're in homes, it's probably gonna be like in crawl spaces or sheds, corners of sheds, areas that you don't frequent. If you've got a lot of people moving around, they're not gonna be out in the open. And
Mhm.
that goes for pretty much any spider that's gonna be in a house or something like that. Your cobweb spiders, and you find those in basements or in the corner of rooms, if you don't knock the webs
Mhm.
down and stuff like that. So
And their webs aren't very pretty or intricate. They're pretty random strands of webbing, and then the spider sort of hangs out there, waiting for its prey. It's not like Charlotte from Charlotte's Web. Charlotte, she designed very nice web. I wonder what type of spider Charlotte was. We should get a spider. We should get Casey Athey back here to talk about Charlotte. Must have been like an orb weaver or something, but she didn't look like an
yes.
orb weaver on the cartoon that I watched.
Well, that'd be a deep dive.
Yes, deep dive into Charlotte's Web.
So I would say, as often as they're vilified, don't frequently come into contact with them. I know when I was in Florida, when I was working at Disney World, we get them in the banana plants a lot. So one of my jobs as the entomology intern was go out and pick egg sacs and collect. We had brown widows in the
Mm.
greenhouses. which looks similar to black. They're just brown. You go out and collect those before the ride opened up and stuff. And so one time when we were living down there in grad school, apparently got some egg sacs on our stroller, put it in the trunk of our car. It was there for a week or two. Opened up the trunk, and there was hundreds of widow spiderlings running around in our
Cool.
trunk. I thought it was cool. My wife not so much, but so
Well, you
got
had a baby. Yeah.
got the shop back out, vacuumed them all up, and that was the end of that.
Hmm.
Needless to say, the stroller was not stored outside anymore after that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting too that you're finding them in the banana tree. So Harry Belafonte sang about tarantulas being in a bunch of bananas. So, but instead you're finding black widows in your banana bunches down in Florida.
Yeah, it was fun. Just get my little jar, pop them in there with alcohol, and call it a day.
Hmm. Cool. Well, neat. Yeah, I guess we have another spider that. Or are we done with black widow?
I think we're done.
Okay.
Don't worry about them. Well, I worry about them if you get bit, but they're not
Hmm.
out to get you, and you
Yeah.
don't see them very often.
Mhm. So yes, it's not like arachnophobia. They are not actively trying to bite you. They don't want to bite you. They want to stay away from you. To most wildlife, humans equal death. So they don't want to be around us. But there is another spider that we have next, the brown recluse. Now, this one I think is very interesting in that kind of like what we said with the Black Widow, there is a lot of self-diagnosed, but there's also so when he's now retired, but entomologist Phil Nixon, when he worked with Extension, he would talk about insects and spiders, and people would inevitably ask about brown recluse. Um, and he would say one statistic, I don't know the numbers, he had numbers and stuff to go along with this, but he would say there are more brown recluse bites that are diagnosed by doctors like me um, in Idaho than confirmed sightings of brown recluse in that state, which have yet to be found there. Now, I don't know, this was a couple years ago, so between then and now, maybe there are some brown recluse in Idaho. And so that is entirely possible. But considering that they've never found them there in that state, yet every year several diagnoses from you know, qualified physicians, more qualified than myself, I guess, but um, they still diagnose those as brown recluse bite. So yeah, I think it's we all kind of want to blame the spider, where in fact it probably wasn't that particular species. Maybe it was a different species or wasn't a spider at all.
Yeah, I found an article from Colorado State Extension. I'll just read the paragraph they have on bites. So, despite the near total lack of Loxosceles, which are the recluse spiders in Colorado, dermonecrotic lesions are commonly diagnosed, parentheses, misdiagnosed as spider bites, more specifically as resulting from the bites of the recluse spiders. Other more likely causes for dermonecrotic lesions and causes that have been misdiagnosed as spider bites include bacterial infections from staph or strep strains, viral infections, particularly herpes or shingles, fungal infections, lymphoma, Lyme disease, diabetic ulcers, poison ivy, just to name a few. So, like a lot of cases, if it's you got some necrosis or rashes or stuff on skin, a lot of people want to jump immediately to spiders, particularly brown recluse. I think they include MRSA and stuff in there as well.
Yeah. Well, I think people are just scared of this. They hear necrotic flesh. It terrifies them. Oh, my skin's rotting. That they don't like hearing that. I don't like hearing that. And I'm a doctor today, at least for this hour that we're doing this. So, now there is one thing. So I think why they're so rare in our parts of the world is because they really can't survive our colder winters as well in the outdoors. They're not as hardy. They're more of a southern species. However, and this kind of goes into, well, where they might be popping up in the north is through the movement and sale of goods from home. So, like garage sales, yard sales. If you buy something at an auction, they can survive perhaps in a basement in a home and then get moved from house to house through household goods or furniture or something like that. Actually, we have a colleague, Andrew Holsinger, whose office is infested with brown recluse. And I think he says he sees them quite frequently. I guess, Ken, when we are looking at a brown recluse spider, it's not just any brown spider. I mean, are we looking for a fiddle on the back? What is there some ID things we can think of, or is the fiddle not always consistent?
Yeah, so with the recluse spiders, particularly brown recluse, so go back to kind of that range. I think your area may be Quad Cities. That's kind of like the northern limit you see on the map. So in
Hmm.
Illinois, we're getting into the kind of the northern limit of brown recluse. Most of them are in the southern. There's several different species there in the southern states. Yeah, for brown recluse, you know, commonly people talk about when we're identifying them. They have that fiddle shaped. Um, so these are kind of a tan spider, but they have dark or darker brown fiddle shaped pattern on that cephalothorax, that head thorax area, and that's usually how people identify them. But that's not necessarily the best way to do it. There are other spiders that have somewhat similar markings and can be misidentified as them. Some of the cellar spiders, even like grass spiders, have brown markings, lines and stuff on their cephalothorax and stuff. So that's not um, as foolproof as people like to think. The best way to identify them is to look at the eyes. So brown recluse have three pairs, sets of two eyes and three pairs. So you've got three clusters of two eyes on that head. That's distinctive to the recluses and stuff. So that's, if you've got one, you probably want to make sure it's dead before you're doing this, or put it in a container. You can take it to your local extension office. I'm sure our colleagues will love us for this.
Oh yeah,
Um,
they're gonna love us. Yes.
but you can look at that and you look at those eyes and that those clusters of two pair of eyes and three clusters is diagnostic for the recluse spiders. That is the way we should be identifying them to confirm that it is a
Mm.
recluse spider.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll try to find a picture and pop it up in here if we can
Mhm.
find a one that's okay to use.
Ask Andrew to catch a couple, see if he can send them our way. No, don't send them our way. We don't want them up here, but take a picture, Andrew. Yeah. So, well, so I hope that maybe eases people's fears about spiders. I very often find myself talking to my spiders in my house, especially the kind of more hairy, kind of jumping spiders. I find them just fascinating to watch, very interesting. They seem almost intelligent to that point. Um, I know some people have even kind of trained them to hop on their hands and stuff. And so, and I think there was a Casey Athy who had also mentioned that, like, all spiders contain some type of venom, but not all spiders have the capability to bite you or to puncture your skin. So, yeah,
Yeah,
spiders are our friends.
or the venom is strong enough to do anything to you. So yeah, all
Yes.
spiders are venomous. We should
Hmm.
probably talk. Venom and poisonous also get
Yeah.
interchanged quite a bit. And there is a difference. So venom is something you're injecting, whether that be a spider injecting it in their bite, a snake, bee or wasp when they sting you, they're injecting that venom. Whereas poisonous, you have to consume
Hmm.
that organism. It's like
Yeah.
monarch caterpillars. I guess we poison. Well, yeah, probably poisonous.
Hmm. Make
Maybe
you
not.
sick.
Maybe not the
Yeah.
best example, but you have to consume it for that. For if it's poisonous for that to work, whereas venom is injected by
Hmm.
fangs or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. So, the whole natural world is trying to kill us at all times. So, just another reminder as we celebrate spooky season here in old horticulture podcast land. Well, Ken, I think we could move on to maybe another group of insects, the old Lepidoptera type. The guys with the complete life cycle. From caterpillar to whatever else they morph into, whether it's a moth or a butterfly or whatever it is they're going to become. And so let's talk stinging caterpillars. Now, you had shared a book with me, um, and we kind of helped use that book as kind of a, what do we want to talk about when it comes to creepy crawlies? What was the name of that particular book?
That is Wicked Books. Yeah, that's the inspiration for today's podcast.
Wicked
Is it
Bugs. Yes,
Amy
by
Stewart?
Mhm.
She wrote Wicked Plants and was it The Drunken Botanist. She's written
Mhm.
several books on this type of stuff.
Well, it is a very interesting book. Um, and we were able to mine just a couple stories from these. One of the stories, especially with stinging caterpillars, I found very in this light of Halloween season, very spooky. So here, a 22-year-old woman. She's from Canada. She is going on vacation in Peru, and as she returns back to Canada, she finds strange bruises on her legs. Over the next few days, as the bruises get larger and larger, she starts to feel pain and it hurts. And she recalled while in Peru, she stepped on some caterpillars when she was barefoot. Now, it hurt when she stepped on them, but the next day she felt fine. So, really, just sort of wrote it off. Once she was admitted to the hospital, though, the doctors determined it was a stinging caterpillar from Brazil. So, they had to order antivenom in this case. And unfortunately, though, the antivenom was coming from Brazil. It was 2 days away and it did not arrive in time. Her organs started shutting down and she died before she got the antivenom. Now, everyone watching or listening, this is a very rare situation. This does not usually happen in North America. We don't have,
This is
especially
South
Illinois.
America.
This is South America, where it's very scary. Halloween all year, and no, I'm kidding. It's not. But Illinois is definitely is not very common. But we do have stinging caterpillars or caterpillars that can create some type of a skin reaction in people that might handle them. Just recently, a friend of ours, they had a daughter that was handling a white tussock moth caterpillar. And as she was handling it, she noticed, well, a lot of the hairs, the caterpillar's not as hairy as it was when I was handling it. Didn't really think much of it. Later that night, she woke up and kind of with these painful rashes, which just grew and grew and got worse and worse. And they figured out it was from her handling that particular caterpillar. Um, and so it happens here in Illinois. So I think it is we try to tell people, especially hairy caterpillars really in general, we don't want to handle them.
Yeah, it's another do as I say, not as I do. I am very bad about picking up caterpillars and other insects with my bare hands. But yeah, if it's hairy or it has spines on it, there's a reason. Those are there. Don't
Yep.
don't pick them up.
Yes.
So two we picked out from the book, and these are just two examples. And we do have these in Illinois. They're not particularly prevalent, but they do occasionally. I think these are you see them a little more often in the South, but even then, they're not. It's not like webworms and stuff where they're all over the
Yeah.
place. These are
Hmm.
occasionally interact with them. So one is saddleback caterpillar, and I think this one has been described as having like kind of the most painful sting um, of caterpillars. We can pop up at least for North America, pop up a picture of that. So it's green caterpillar. The front and back are kind of brown. They have these humps on them. They got spines coming out of them on either end, and in the very middle, they have this brownish patch surrounded in white that kind of looks like a saddle. The saddleback caterpillar. So again, and they have those bumps with the spines coming out of there. And usually, if you brush up with these, you get a rash, and they make contact with the skin. Those spines are hollow, and they have poison glands attached to them. They usually have a burning sensation and inflammation. They've been described as painful as a bee sting when you brush up against these. The irritation can last for several days, in some cases, maybe a week or two. If you're particularly sensitive to it, you get redness and swelling of the area, again, similar to a bee sting. So with this one, if you know you brush up against it, you want to try to remove those hairs, put like tape or something on it so you can pull them out. Wash the affected area, soap and water. Um, Put an ice pack on there, help reduce the swelling and stuff. And then you do recommendations are commonly antihistamines or pain relievers, something like that to help with pain, headache, stuff like that. Antihistamine can help with the itching and burning as well. So
Yeah.
people that are
If you find
particularly
your
sensitive may need medical attention though. So
Yep, that's what I was gonna say. Like you once that thing really starts blooming, bothering you, and again, your sensitivity, it differs. Uh, be a good idea to talk to a doctor, preferably one without a clown wig on. But hey,
unless
Patch
it's
Adams did
Halloween
it. Yeah, unless it's Halloween. Yeah.
and you're in their office.
Yes. So we had the saddleback caterpillar. But then this one is also kind of gross sounding. The pus caterpillar. Ugh. What kind of skin reaction does that create by chance with our pus caterpillar?
Yeah, Puss caterpillar, and there's another one we can pop a picture of. This one actually I have pictures of. We saw one of these last summer in Florida, and I resisted the urge to touch it just to find out how bad.
See what happens. Don't lick it.
I learned by doing. And I think it's similar. So this is so caterpillars of Eastern North America. If you want to ID caterpillars, this is a really good field guide. So I'm going to read a description from here. This is of the white flannel moth, which is related um, to the pus caterpillar, also called the southern flannel moth. But it's according to them, the symptoms are fairly similar. So this is a description by somebody. The guy who collected it said it stung him, but I picked it up with my fingertips and did not get stung. So perhaps, fool that I am, I gently rubbed the inside of my wrist over it. It took probably a minute and a half or 2 minutes, but it started with an itchy burning that within 5 minutes turned to a red spot the size of a quarter. After about 15 minutes, 3 white blisters appeared and lasted for about 2 hours, burning the whole time, but gradually diminishing in intensity. The blisters also shrank to nothing in that time. After the blisters disappeared, the itching lasted another several hours, and the redness until the next morning. So, with these, this pus moth, it looks kind of like a hairpiece. It's just this fuzzy little blob. It's got a little fuzzy tail, a hairy tail at the end there. And there's a couple different species that kind of look like these little hairy blobs and stuff. And again, those underneath that hair, they've got these kind of urticating spines that can cause irritation and stuff. So, moral of the story is if you see something that's got spines or is hairy and it's a caterpillar, leave alone. And I think both of these, both the saddleback and the pus caterpillar, feed on a wide host range. So they feed on all kinds of different things. So, again, they can be found in, I've never seen them, either of these in Illinois, but they do exist here potentially.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like when I look these guys up, each one, it seems to be associated with multiple news stories about school children. When they are out on the playground, they'll find this caterpillar and then they start messing around with it. Like that was like the top internet search results was news story, school children, a series of rashes from a caterpillar. And so I found that history. And then it also seems like spongy moth is another one of those that causes rashes, which I learned about through a news story when school children were playing with a spongy moth caterpillar.
So I think some of this probably depends a little bit on how sensitive people are and stuff like white tussock moths. I've picked those up and not really had any issues. Maybe I'm just lucky. I'll have to find one and play with it again and see what happens.
Well, I think this young girl was holding it for quite a while. Like this caterpillar had plenty of time to
release its hairs
release its hairs, and there was it had warning hairs and stuff, and that all so they said the caterpillar was quite bald by the time the girl let it go. So yeah,
that may do it.
Yeah, I think so. Well, Ken, let us change gears once more to perhaps one of, not the, I think maybe a future show we can talk about the deadliest insect, the mosquito, but that's some other future episode. But let's talk about the Oriental rat flea. So in 1907, two boys out on the West Coast, they found a dead rat. Now their father was an undertaker, so they decided to find a nice makeshift coffin and bury it, just like their dad, So they brought it home when it was dinner time as they're preparing its burial. And along with that dead rat, they brought home the fleas that infested that rat. And these fleas were infected with the plague. Within a month, the plague had claimed the lives of the boys' parents, but had spared the boys, leaving them orphans. This is such a sad story, but a very common story through the history of humans of plague-riddled rats spreading the disease throughout human settlements, cities, towns, even farms. We are talking about the Oriental rat flea, which is also a carrier of plague. So, and I believe that is a bacterium. So it's one that we can treat better these days with antibiotics, but um, it is still here on the world today. Um, so I tell us about the Oriental rat flea.
Yeah, so it carries, so many different types of fleas can carry Yersinia pestis, which is what causes bubonic plague, pneumonic plague, the plague, and stuff. So um, the Justinian's plague killed about 40 million people in the 6th century. You learn about in school Black Death in Europe that killed, what was it, a third of Europe or something like that. 25 million people. There's been plague outbreaks, across the world, Egypt, Africa. I guess Egypt is in Africa, but other parts of Africa, China, India, even in the U.S., there's been outbreaks of plague here, and stuff. So these rats carry this bacteria, and with this, the bacteria kind of plugs up the gut of the flea as it's feeding, so it can't feed, so it starts regurgitating that blood meal. When it regurgitates that blood meal, it regurgitates that bacteria, and people can get infected. And I think what was the stat? About 200 million people have died of plague, throughout the history of mankind, which is more than all wars combined throughout history. So again, but it is a bacteria, so we can treat this nowadays. It's not nearly the concern it once was. It is. We do have plague in the United States and in the Western U.S. Was it prairie dogs, some other
Mhm.
rodents can carry it and stuff. And there are cases that pop up every year of that. But again, if it's recognized, you get treated. Um, People are fine. I think again, people will still die, but not. We're not handful of people a year, something like that. We're not getting thousands or millions of people dying from this anymore.
Right. I think it's also important to note, like specifically the Oriental rat flea, the one that was dealt with in this story, it does not want to feed on a human. It really doesn't want to feed on a cat or a dog or a pet. It is very specific to rats. But in the absence of rats, it will try to change hosts to avoid starving to death. Um, and then very often it is not successful in that. It might feed on a human, but it's still, like you said, it can't, its gut's plugged up, still winds up dying. So I think it's interesting in history when the bubonic plague and all of these diseases were being spread through these rats. The other thing happening is that people associated cats over in Europe with witches, and they would actively try to eliminate cats from areas where the cats could probably have helped in the control of this. Um, and so I just think that's just an interesting little tidbit of history, that witchcraft played a role in the plague, but not in the way you think. The witches aren't making people sick. People thought the cats were witches or part of the witches coven or whatever. And yeah, so there was active um, campaigns to eliminate cats from entire countries because they thought witches. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, I think was it too. They, back in the 1300s or 14, yeah, 1300s, they'd close up your houses. The bad air is what carried it, and don't bathe and stuff like that. Which I would assume you probably want your windows closed because people were dying faster than they could be buried, and probably
Mhm.
smelled. I can't imagine how bad that would have smelled, but not bathing and stuff. Again, these unsanitary conditions and just yeah.
lot Probably lots of things happening, lots of if they had lots of spider bites misdiagnosed there, it's all kinds of rashes and necrotic flesh from not bathing. So yeah, ooh yeah, the plague.
Red by rat. So, and I think, I think was it, I think the cat flea can also spread it. I don't think it does as well as the Oriental rat flea. So usually, you- most people probably don't try to identify fleas, but usually when we talk about fleas, we talk about they have the combs on the front of their
Mhm.
on their head, kind of look like a mustache. Oriental rat flea actually doesn't have that. So if we wanted to tell them apart, they don't have the mustache we typically see or typically talk about when you're identifying fleas.
Interesting. Yeah, the fleas do. Most fleas look very nice. They look very dapper. Um, but
Not
the
patting them on
Oriental
both.
rat flea, yeah, lacking that mustache.
All right, we want to talk about symptoms. So
Uh,
if you don't remember from your history in high school
Hmm.
or middle school. At least for the bubonic plague, usually headache, fever, weakness, fatigue. Then you get those swollen, painful lymph nodes, the buboes, and stuff, so
Hmm.
like the sacs in the armpits and stuff. And there's also pneumonic plague, which gets into the lungs and stuff. But again, with antibiotics nowadays, it can be treated. So, and it's not in Illinois. It's just more out west. So, I mean, it's usually people who are doing a lot of outdoors activities and coming into close proximity with the wild rodents. So, it's ground squirrels, prairie dogs, rock squirrels, things like that.
I'm glad we stopped blaming witches and we use science to figure out a treatment for this stuff. Well, Ken, our last a creepy crawly for today is one that can seem to pop up here and there. I know in hushed tones, parents will talk about this from stories in the schoolyard. Lice. We have three different types of lice that can affect humans. There's like all insects, there's many species out there, but the three that affect humans are going to be your hair slash head lice. You see, called different things. Your body lice, and then your pubic lice. Now, I know we had talked about before the show. There is some debate whether hair lice and body lice are maybe different subspecies instead of different species. Um, but it is body lice that is known to transmit diseases. And actually, while Napoleon might credit a cold winter with defeating his army as he invaded Russia, um, probably the body louse is one of the main culprits when it comes to that. So as Napoleon's army was invading into Russia, his as I think it was like 500,000 troops, they needed supplies, and so they would raid villages and farms and towns, and they would take people's items and clothing for warmth. And then it turned out a lot of this clothing was infested with body lice. And one soldier wrote in his journal that he awoke one night to find his skin tingling and itching, and he found his clothing that he had gotten to be infested with insects, with vermin. He said, so he threw it into the fire. And unfortunately, that was like one of the coldest winters then that then followed that. So he probably wished he hadn't thrown his clothing in the fire. I wonder how many other soldiers threw their clothing in the fire. Um, but the body louse, it can spread different diseases. So there's louse-borne typhus, trench fever, and louse-borne relapsing fever. Um, and so it is believed that in addition with the cold weather, the lice, the body lice, contributed uh, quite heavily to the defeat of Napoleon's army.
And don't they lay their eggs on the clothing? They're not laying it on with their host. It's usually
Correct.
typically on the clothing.
The body lice will lay their eggs on the clothing. They do not lay it on the hosts themselves. So, but that makes it difficult then, because if we wash our clothes regularly, um, then we would be destroying those eggs. Where body lice typically pop up, we don't really see them much here in the US. Where they typically pop up are people who might be homeless, people in refugee camps, people in situations where they can't wash their clothes routinely. They're wearing the same outfit days and weeks at a time. That gives the body louse time for it to lay its eggs in the clothing and then just continue to reinfest its host. Um, so yeah, those are usual situations when that happens. So like, yeah, when the bubonic plague's happening and they're telling you don't wash yourself, you're probably wearing the same clothes over and over again. Do you get the plague? Maybe not, but you might get one of these body lice diseases. So yeah, there's all, yeah. So the body louse, that is more associated with kind of like cleanliness. And so that can be remedied with that. The head louse or head lice, plural, that is not really associated with filth. Head lice is something that is very commonly talked about among school children. Um, it can be shared. So if I had someone who had head lice wearing my clown wig before me, well, guess what? I just could have introduced that to my head, or a hat. comb, hair products, things like hair uh, brushes. Um, that's how hair lice spreads. Um, it can be somewhat easy to control. However, there's some resistance developing in head lice, and so that has had to change some of the chemistry of what people are using. However, the nits, which are the eggs that are laid in the hair, you can remove those with a very fine-toothed comb, and usually coating the hair in like vegetable oil, and combing out the nits from the hair kind of one by one when some of those medications fail.
I'd say the eggs are usually near the base of the scalp. It's not like they're on the tips, so
Yes.
you got to get in there.
Yep.
And they're close. I
Yep.
think, and then CDC came out with some new guidance where if you have a kid at school that has head lice, you do not need to send them home right away. They can finish the day and then send them home. And then they can come back once the treatment is done.
Correct. Yeah, because it's managed through avoiding, again, contact with something that is going from like head to head. So don't they can manage that in the school, probably better than sometimes at home. So they, just avoiding contact with anything from their head to another student's head. That's how it spreads. It's not gonna. They don't jump. They cling. They don't jump. So they're not flying. They're not jumping. They cling to things. Well, I guess, if we have our head lice and we have our body lice, that leaves the pubic lice. Um, so the pubic lice is a very different in its morphology or its shape. It's very crab-like, and it's closely related to gorilla lice. And I'm going to read this quote just directly from the book here, just because I just want to make sure I say it accurately. And so head lice and body lice, these are things that were transferred to humans from 100,000 to over 1 million years ago. So that, it's been a while. But when it comes to the transfer of pubic lice, I believe they are transferred to humans through some sort of intimate physical contact with gorillas, because they closely resemble gorilla lice. So the precise details of which remain a mystery. End quote. And listeners, viewers will let your minds make up whatever uh, imagery you care to from here on. Yes, but they're very crab-like. And I think the interesting thing is that they have these claw-like appendages, and because of this, because like pubic hair is more coarser than your hair on your head, they have to have better grip strength. They have to be able to hold on tight, and wherever they grip on, they feed there forever. And so very often you can see where their fecal droppings, their frass is located there. It will begin to accumulate and build up. And so that's a very good way to see them. And then the other thing is, because they're crab-like, that's why they're also known as crabs. And so that's good. Lots of good jokes here that I'm not going to make. So
Now, say yeah, with your head and body lice, they are more slender, more angular looking. Where
mhm,
the pubic crab lice are they're broader, and yeah, look like a crab.
mhm.
We
They look
can
like crabs.
pop up pictures too.
Yes. Of just the louse, not where they feed. So the other thing is, people often say rumors of like, oh, well, if I use a public toilet, I'm going to get crabs, or hotel beds. Now, theoretically, this is true, or it not true. This is possible, but they do not survive very long at all when they are off of their host. So it is very unlikely that you would get crabs from a toilet or from bed sheets or anything like that. The known transmission of this is through sexual contact. And this is also why the French, they call pubic lice, I'll try to excuse my pronunciation, a papillon d'amour, or the butterflies of love. And so the we can I think they describe it so much better. It's better than crabs. So maybe we should just call it butterflies of love from now on, Ken.
You can start that movement.
People wouldn't know what I was talking about. Like, oh yeah, I like butterflies of love. Like, oh yeah, we. Yes. So yeah, that's our slate of creepy crawlies. And if you want to know more about that, you can learn about that through that book, Wicked Insects. So
With the bug.
Wicked Bugs.
Indie
Wicked
stories.
Bugs. Hmm. It was a good read. There was a lot of interesting stories in there. I like the stories behind things, so helps me learn about them. So. Well, that was a lot of great information about the creepy crawlies that, with the lore behind them, or perhaps some of the impacts that they still continue to have on humans to this day. Well, the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by Ken Johnson. Okay, thank you,
Yes.
Ken. Thanks, Ken. Well, I after talking about head lice and wearing this wig, I'm just itching. I got to get this thing off of me. So, but Ken, thank you for editing and for hanging out this week, chatting about all of the creepy crawlies that are a part of our lives and that fascinate and terrify us this spooky season.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully that wasn't a used wig.
Oh, heavily used. I got it off a clown on the side of the road.
And let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. It's gotten cold, which means it is really fall now. So we will be chatting about cold weather things now. What do we do in the garden when it's cold? Sip hot tea, cocoa, coffee, whatever it is, and enjoy the cool, crisp mornings. Well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm sorry in advance, or not in advance. This is a post
After the fact.
after the fact.
Thank you
I'm
for
sorry.
enduring this.
Thank you for enduring our gnome/clown doctor get-ups. Oh, thank you for watching. And as always, keep on growing. Recording started. All right, here we go. This colored clown hair in my mouth. Okay. Ugh. Okay, here we go. Ya ta ta ta.